I'm Meredith Walsh, 36 years old, and the night of my engagement party should have been the beginning of forever. I remember the way the fairy lights glowed along the backyard fence, soft gold against the deep blue of a summer evening. Guests were laughing, champagne glasses clinking. My father had even lit the old swing hanging from the oak tree out back, and Ryan had just finished his toast, voice shaking as he told everyone how lucky he felt to be mine. I'd stepped inside for barely 5 minutes just to touch up my lipstick. When I came back, something in the air felt off, and in less than 60 seconds, the life I'd been building for nearly 5 years collapsed under me. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments and tap that like and subscribe. If you've ever had to start over with nothing but your name and your backbone. I was raised in a small town in Indiana, the kind of place where people still wave when they pass each other on the street. My parents believed in hard work and keeping appearances polite. My younger sister Nicole was always the star of the family, prettier, more outgoing, more impulsive. But I didn't mind. I'd always been quiet, dependable. The one teachers called responsible and adults described as steady. I didn't need attention. I just wanted a good life, with good people. I met Ryan at a work conference in Cincinnati. He was charming but gentle, soft-spoken. The kind of man who held open doors and remembered how I took my coffee. We dated for almost 5 years, and by the end of it, I knew every curve of his laugh, every pause in his sentences. He wasn't flashy, but I loved that about him. He made me feel seen and safe. We'd just signed the lease on a house near the lake with plans to move in. That fall, the night of our engagement party felt like a page out of a storybook. My mother had arranged roses for the tables, and my dad strung up lights just like he used to for summer cookouts. When we were little, Nicole flew in from Denver for the party, and everyone was happy to see her. She always drew a crowd with her jokes and stories, and I was glad she came, even if part of me worried she'd overshadow things like she sometimes did. After Ryan gave his speech, I slipped inside to catch my breath and fix my mascara. The air was warm and smelled like cut grass and grill smoke. When I stepped back out, someone said they'd seen Ryan and Nicole head toward the side yard. I smiled. I thought maybe she was showing him the old tree swing, maybe telling him stories from our childhood. But when I turned the corner, what I saw didn't belong in any storybook. They didn't see me right away. They were standing close, too close. Nicole's hands around his neck, his mouth on hers. It wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was something practiced, something real. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. Not then. I just backed away slowly down the side of the house, past the gate, onto the sidewalk, heels clacking on the pavement as I walked past parked cars and unfamiliar porches, until I reached the hotel downtown, where the night clerk didn't ask why I was shaking or why my makeup was smeared. He just handed me a key card and pointed down the hall. The next morning, my phone buzzed with messages. Ryan, Nicole, even my mother. But I couldn't bring myself to look. Not yet. I called my best friend Sarah instead. Her voice cracked when she answered, and when I finally told her what I saw, all she said was, "I'm coming." I thought that would be the worst of it. The betrayal, the shock, the loneliness. But what waited for me back at home was something colder, something I didn't know I was still capable of feeling. I didn't go back to the party. I couldn't. I walked for blocks in those heels, the dress I'd picked out months earlier, clinging uncomfortably to my back. I kept my head down, didn't look behind me. At some point, I ended up in the lobby of a hotel near the Riverwalk. It was clean, quiet beige. I gave the front desk clerk my card without saying much. My hand shook when I signed my name. The room was cold. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time before I even realized I was still wearing my earrings. They'd been a gift from Ryan, little pearls on silver hooks. I pulled them off slowly like they were part of someone else's body. I kept the lights off. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound for hours. Then my phone started buzzing on the nightstand. One message, then another. Ryan, Nicole, then Ryan again. I didn't open them. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then lit up again. I called Sarah instead. She picked up before the first ring finished. Meredith. Where are you? Are you okay? I couldn't answer at first. I tried to speak, but it came out as a breathless sob. She waited. I heard her move, maybe sit up in bed. I saw them, I finally said. By the oak tree. She had her arms around him. There was silence. A long, stunned silence. I saw them kissing, I said. She didn't say anything at first. Then quietly, "Are you somewhere safe?" "I'm at a hotel," I whispered. I didn't know where else to go. Sarah told me to stay put. Said she'd bring clothes and something to eat. Then she asked if I'd read the messages. I told her no. "You should," she said. "Not because it matters now, but you need to hear what they have to say, out loud, while I'm here." I put her on speaker and opened the first one. It was from Ryan. "Meredith, I'm sorry you had to see that. I didn't mean for it to happen that way. The truth is, I've had feelings for Nicole for a while. I thought I could move on. That's why I proposed. But I can't lie to myself anymore." I read it in a flat voice. My throat felt dry. "You were a distraction," the message said. "I didn't want to hurt you." Sarah muttered something sharp under her breath. I didn't ask her to repeat it. The next message was from Nicole. "I know you're hurt," she wrote, "but you have to understand, this wasn't planned. We tried to fight it. But fate has other ideas." She called it fate. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a soft, perfumed rewriting of what she'd done. I don't know why, but a memory hit me then, clear as glass. I was 16 getting ready for prom. Our grandmother had given me a silver locket to wear. It was delicate and old and meant the world to me. Nicole had begged to wear it for her middle school dance the week before. I said no. She cried. My mother called me selfish. My father told me not to make things harder than they needed to be. They made me give it to her. She lost it that same night. I cried. She got comforted. I got told not to make her feel bad. That was the pattern. Nicole made a mess, and I was expected to clean around it. My feelings were always called dramatic. Hers were protected like crystal. That night in the hotel, I didn't sleep. Sarah came and sat with me. She brought sweatpants, a sandwich, a soft blanket that smelled like her dryer sheets. She didn't say much, just sat on the little chair across from the bed and watched a muted cooking show until morning. I stayed in that hotel for 3 days. By the 4th, I knew I couldn't hide forever. I drove home mid-morning. The sun was out. A breeze was moving through the trees. It didn't feel like a day where anything was wrong. But when I pulled into the driveway, my parents' car was already there. I sat in the car for a moment, hoping maybe they'd just dropped something off. But when I opened the front door, I heard voices. I stepped into the living room and froze. My mother and father were on the couch, coffee mugs in hand. Nicole and Ryan were there too, sitting close on the love seat. Their hands were clasped together. No one looked ashamed. My mother turned and smiled at me gently. "Oh, Meredith, we were worried." Ryan reached up and brushed Nicole's hair behind her ear. They both looked settled, comfortable, like they belonged there. My mother's eyes welled up with tears. She held a tissue to her nose and said, "Isn't it wonderful they found each other?" My chest felt hollow. I stared at her. "Wonderful?" I asked. She nodded. "They didn't plan it, honey. But love is strange like that." I looked at Ryan, then at Nicole, then at the couch I'd helped my parents pick out last Christmas. "He was my fiancé," I said. "We were engaged 30 minutes before that kiss happened. You think this is wonderful?" My father stood then. "Now, Meredith, let's not be dramatic. What's done is done. Your sister is happy. You should be too." I couldn't speak. My heart was beating fast, but everything felt slow. Nicole tilted her head, her voice soft and scolding. "You're just jealous," she said. "You're trying to ruin this because you can't stand seeing me happy." That was the moment something in me stopped turning, like a watch that's ticked too long on a dying battery. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just turned, walked upstairs, and pulled out my suitcase. I packed everything I needed: clothes, shoes, toiletries. I took the photo of me and Sarah at the lake but left the family album in the drawer. I could still hear them downstairs talking, laughing. No one came up. When I walked back down, my suitcase thumping behind me, they all stopped and looked at me. My father asked, "Where do you think you're going?" I didn't stop walking. I paused only when I reached the front door. "I hope you'll all be very happy together," I said. "Goodbye." Then I closed the door and left. That was the last time I saw any of them for a very long time. The first apartment I moved into after I left wasn't much, a narrow studio on the second floor of a brick building near the train tracks. The floor creaked when I walked. The water in the shower never got quite hot enough. The walls were thin enough to hear the neighbor's TV if he forgot to turn it down. But the door locked, and no one knew where I was except Sarah. That was enough. The first few weeks were quiet. I went to work. I came home. I didn't answer calls. I didn't check social media. I kept the curtains closed most days. My things were still in boxes. Sarah came by when she could, always knocking gently, never asking too many questions. She brought dinner sometimes, a candle in a jar, a throw blanket she said I could keep. She didn't try to fix anything. She just stayed nearby, and somehow that helped. People talk about heartbreak like it's loud. Mine wasn't. It was slow and heavy, like wet snow on tree branches. I'd wake up in the middle of the night without knowing why. I'd stand at the sink brushing my teeth and suddenly forget what day it was. The coffee shop down the street started to recognize me. I'd order the same thing every morning and sit at the far table by the window. I didn't read or scroll my phone. I just sat there letting the minutes pass. Around that time, I got a wedding invitation. It came to Sarah's apartment in a thick cream envelope. No note inside, just my name written in Nicole's handwriting. I didn't open it, just dropped it straight into the trash and took the bag outside that same evening. I didn't want it in the house. Some mutual friends reached out, a few of my cousins too. Not everyone had known what happened. But once they did, the silence began to shift. Some people stopped speaking to my parents altogether. Others kept their distance, but didn't look at me the same way anymore, like they suddenly realized what they'd missed. My parents never called, not once, not to check on me, not to explain. Instead, I focused on work. I was still a junior associate at the time. Most days I kept my head down, but when a new client account came in, I volunteered. Late nights, early mornings, reworking ad proposals while everyone else clocked out. It didn't make the loneliness go away, but it gave it less room to stretch out. I saved what I could, skipped dinners out, waited for sales before buying anything new. By the end of that first year, I had enough for a deposit on a better place. The new apartment was on the 10th floor of a newer building with clean hallways and quiet neighbors. A security desk downstairs, a washer and dryer tucked into the closet. It had a balcony just wide enough for a small chair and a plant. I painted the walls a soft gray blue and bought dishes that matched. I didn't furnish it all at once. I waited. Picked pieces I really liked. A cherrywood dresser. A coffee table that didn't wobble. There were still hard days. Holidays came with an ache in the chest. Especially Thanksgiving. I'd grown up helping my mother make the stuffing, passing her ingredients one by one as she read from her old notebook. The silence in my own kitchen that first November was thick. I made grilled cheese and tomato soup and watched a movie with Sarah. But little by little, things began to change. I joined a book club through the library, met a woman named Ellen who invited me to her church group. I didn't attend regularly, but they sent kind notes in the mail. One day I signed up for a pottery class and laughed harder than I had in months when my bowl collapsed on the wheel. The work promotions kept coming too, first to project lead, then to associate director. I managed bigger campaigns, oversaw younger hires, traveled to conferences, and even gave a short presentation once in Atlanta. When I turned 34, I celebrated quietly with dinner on my balcony. Just Sarah and a couple of friends from the office. They brought lemon cake and a little fern in a ceramic pot. By then, 5 years had passed since the engagement party. 5 years since I'd last seen my parents or spoken to Nicole. The pain didn't disappear completely, but it dulled, became something I could carry. A scar, not a wound. Some nights I'd lie on my couch with the windows open and let the city sounds drift in. I didn't think about them often. When I did, it was like remembering a dream you're no longer sure really happened. But one evening just after dinner, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something in me said not to. I picked up. Meredith. The voice was shaky, older. It took me a second to place it. Mom. And just like that, the quiet years were broken. There was a pause on the line after I said her name, long enough that I thought maybe the call had dropped. Then she exhaled and said, "Thank God. Meredith, I didn't know if you'd pick up." I stayed quiet. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice tight. It's about Nicole." Of course it was. "I can't do this right now," I said. I was already reaching to hang up. "No, please," she said quickly. "Just listen. 2 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I stood in the kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear, the dishwasher humming quietly behind me. "They're in trouble," she said. "Bad trouble." I didn't speak. After the wedding, Nicole and Ryan used their gifts and savings to start a business. Something with boutique consulting. Honestly, I never fully understood it. She sniffed like she'd been crying. It didn't work. They burned through everything in under a year. She kept going, voice unsteady. Credit cards, personal loans. Then when no bank would help, they turned to someone else. Not a bank, not legal. "Meredith, they owe over $90,000, she said. "They're being threatened. These people, these men aren't bluffing. We're scared." I leaned on the counter with one hand trying to stay calm. "We gave what we had," she continued. "Your father and I drained our retirement account. We even took from the college fund we'd set aside for—" She stopped. "We were hoping you might— I know it's a lot, but anything. Just to get them out of this." I didn't answer right away. "We wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent," she said. "They're out of options." I looked around the kitchen. The countertops I'd saved up for. The soft yellow paint I chose on my day off. A half-finished puzzle on the dining table. The life I'd built from scratch. "No," I said. "Meredith." "No," I said again, clearer this time. She was quiet. "You're really going to let your own sister go through this? I didn't let her do anything I said. She made a mistake. You're being cruel. You're punishing her." I walked to the window, watching the streetlight flicker just outside the building. "This isn't about punishment," I said. "It's about boundaries. I'm not putting out a fire I didn't start. Not anymore." "You sound so cold," she whispered. "This isn't you." I hung up without answering. Then I blocked the number. I thought that would be the end of it. About 30 minutes later, the buzzer in my apartment shrieked. I froze. The intercom panel glowed, showing the camera feed from the building lobby. Nicole and Ryan were there. They looked different, tired, thinner. His shirt was wrinkled, his face drawn. She kept glancing toward the desk, speaking to the concierge. I didn't answer. The buzzer rang again and again. Then I saw something that made my stomach turn. Ryan pulled a narrow tool from his pocket and started picking at the main door's lock. The concierge stepped forward, tried to stop him. Ryan pushed past. I stepped back from the intercom. My hand went to the table where I kept my keys. Attached was a small gray fob, a panic button that connected directly to building security. I hadn't used it before. The elevator dinged. A moment later, there was loud banging on my door. Meredith Nicole's voice, high and sharp. "Open this door. You owe us." The doorknob rattled. I opened the door just a few inches, holding my phone up to record. "Go away," I said. But before I could react, Ryan shoved the door open. I stumbled backward. My phone slipped from my hand and slid across the floor. "No phones," Ryan said. Nicole stepped forward, waving a crumpled paper. "You made us do this," she shouted. "Sign this. It says you'll help cover the debt. That's all we're asking." I backed away slowly, trying to keep calm. My eyes went to the key table. I still had a shot. While they argued, I moved fast. I grabbed the panic fob, pressed and held. 3 seconds. No sound. Just a small light blinking red. They didn't notice. Nicole kept yelling. Ryan was pacing. "It's over," I said. Ryan laughed. "Not until you sign." I looked up and nodded toward the hallway. "You see that?" I said quietly. "Security cameras. This whole thing's recorded." Nicole turned. Her mouth opened. Then the alarm sounded piercing and loud. 2 minutes later, the elevator doors opened again. 2 officers stepped out, followed by the concierge. They took it all in. The open door, my bruised arm, the overturned lamp. "She's crazy," Nicole cried. "She attacked us." The officer ignored her and looked at me. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I nodded. "They forced their way in," I said. "He shoved me. She demanded money." Ryan tried to protest, but the concierge stepped forward. "I saw it," he said. "It's all on camera." The officers moved quickly after that. Handcuffs, rights read. Nicole looked at me the entire time. "Meredith," she said, "please, say something." I didn't. They were led to the elevator. The doors closed. And then it was quiet again. The officers stayed for about 20 minutes after Nicole and Ryan were taken out. One of them helped me retrieve my phone from under the table. The concierge gave his full statement and promised the building's security footage would be handed over to police later that day. I stood in the kitchen answering their questions, holding a glass of water with both hands to stop them from shaking. After they left, the quiet felt thick. I locked the door, drew the bolt, and sat down on the couch without turning on any lights. It was late when I finally got up. I reheated some soup from the fridge and opened my laptop to check work messages. Nothing urgent. I closed it again and left it on the counter. The next few days passed without incident. I didn't hear from anyone, not my parents, not extended family. Sarah came by that weekend with groceries and a stack of clean dish towels she'd picked up on sale. We didn't talk much about what happened. She just sat with me for a few hours while we worked through the jigsaw puzzle still spread out on the table. Then a week later, the doorbell rang again. This time, when I checked the camera feed, it wasn't Nicole or Ryan. It was my parents. My father stood with his hands clasped in front of him. My mother wore a light jacket and carried a folded umbrella under one arm. They looked older than I remembered. Tired. I buzzed them in. They didn't say much at first, just stood there in the entryway glancing around the apartment. My father finally spoke. "You've made a nice home." I nodded. "Can I get you anything?" They both shook their heads. He cleared his throat. "We saw the footage." My mother looked down at the floor. People started calling. Carol. Aunt Linda. Even Pastor Jenkins. They said they saw the news story. The security video. She paused. We didn't know how bad it had gotten. We didn't know what Nicole and Ryan were capable of. My father looked over at me, his voice low. "We were wrong, Meredith. We were so wrong." She stepped closer. "We failed you," she said. "We see that now." The words hung in the room for a long moment. I crossed my arms. "You're not sorry for what you did," I said. "You're sorry people found out." They didn't answer. I looked between them, then gestured toward the living room. "Sit if you'd like." They sat on the edge of the couch like they didn't quite know how to be comfortable there. "I forgave you a long time ago," I said. "Not for your sake, for mine. I had to. I needed to be able to breathe again." My mother blinked quickly and nodded. "But that doesn't mean we go back to how things were," I continued. "That part's over. That version of me, the one who waited for you to come around, who kept giving second chances, that part's gone." They listened. My father nodded slowly. "We understand," he said. "We won't ask you for anything." "I know," I said. "That's not why you're here. You came because the story got out, because people saw what happened and started asking you where I went, what you did. You didn't like the answers." They both looked down again. "I don't need anything from you," I said gently. "I have what I need." No one said much after that. My mother stood first. She glanced toward the dining table where Sarah's puzzle sat mostly finished. "It's good you have people," she said. "Real friends." I walked them to the door. No hugs, just a quiet goodbye and the sound of their shoes echoing in the hallway as they left. I closed the door and turned the bolt. Not because I was afraid, but because it was mine. That night I went back to the puzzle and placed the final few pieces into the sky. Then I made a cup of tea, opened the windows, and let the evening breeze carry through the room. I slept through the night for the first time in weeks. The morning after my parents visited, I opened the curtains a little wider, let more light in. I brewed coffee and stood by the window for a while watching people walk their dogs, cars pulling into the cafe across the street. It felt like the air had shifted somehow. Not lighter exactly, just still. I kept to my usual routine that week. Work during the day, phone calls with Sarah in the evening, a few emails back and forth with Ellen about the upcoming book club pick. I didn't bring up what had happened. I didn't need to. People who knew me didn't press. They let me move forward at my own pace. A few days later, a letter arrived in the mail. Not typed, not official. Just an envelope with my name written in Nicole's handwriting. I recognized the slant of it immediately. I didn't open it. I set it aside and tucked it into the back of my desk drawer. The legal side of things moved quickly. The building's security team had filed the report. The video footage was clear. The police followed through. Nicole and Ryan avoided jail time through a plea deal, but part of the agreement required financial counseling, a court-appointed attorney, and a formal declaration of bankruptcy. They lost their business, their apartment, and their car. From what I heard later, they moved in with my parents. I didn't reach out. I didn't follow the news. But people talked. Word spread. Friends of friends. Neighbors. Someone saw them selling furniture online. Another ran into them at the bank. The story made its way around town like stories do. I didn't feel proud or vindicated. I didn't feel much at all. Just steady. Like I was standing on firm ground again. One Saturday in early fall, I hosted a dinner. Just Sarah, a few women from work, Ellen and her husband. Nothing fancy. Pasta with roasted vegetables, a pie from the bakery down the street, a bottle of red wine I'd been saving since spring. We sat around the table for hours, laughing about old jobs and vacation mishaps, and the time Ellen accidentally locked herself out of her apartment wearing nothing but a bathrobe and fuzzy slippers. After the dishes were cleared and everyone had gone home, I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the empty glasses and the folded napkins. I walked out onto the balcony barefoot, holding the last half cup of wine. The breeze had turned cooler. The sky was wide and dark, a few stars visible between the city lights. I leaned on the railing and thought about the old house, the one with the oak tree and the porch swing, about holidays where Nicole always got the biggest slice of cake, about the locket from Grandma that I never saw again. The sadness came quietly, just a flicker. Not enough to make me cry, just enough to remind me it had all been real. But it passed. Inside the apartment felt warm. My home, my life. I went back in, locked the door behind me, and turned off the lights. I didn't hear much from my parents after that night they showed up at my door. There were no follow-up calls, no letters, no attempts to visit again. I think they understood. Or maybe they simply had too much else to manage. From what I gathered, Nicole and Ryan stayed in my parents' house after the bankruptcy. They sold their car, most of their furniture, and the few business assets they still owned. The court placed them in a mandatory debt management program. Everything they had left was tied up in repayments or legal filings. They were quiet after the arrest. No more emails, no more doorstep confrontations. I suppose once the police were involved, the line had been clearly drawn. Friends still updated me now and then, little things that reached me through the grapevine. Nicole had tried applying for a job at a wedding planning firm, but didn't make it past the first interview. Ryan worked part-time at a warehouse on the edge of town. They rarely went out. Someone said they were even using my old bedroom at my parents' place. I never asked for these updates. People just told me. They thought I'd want to know. I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel triumphant either. There was a time in my life where I might have thought justice looked like a grand apology or a perfect ending. But it turns out it's quieter than that. It's in the steadiness of your breath when you wake up alone and content. It's in having your own key, your own space, your own name on the lease. It's in hosting a dinner and hearing laughter echo in your kitchen, not because someone performed, but because people felt safe. There was a moment not long after everything settled down when I stopped by the grocery store to pick up a few things after work. I was walking through the freezer aisle when I saw them, Nicole and my mother. They didn't see me. Nicole was turned away, speaking low and fast, her coat half-zipped. My mother stood still, holding a grocery basket in both hands. She looked tired. I paused for a second just behind a display of cereal boxes. I could have approached them. I could have said something. But I didn't. Instead, I walked down the next aisle and finished my shopping. Back home, I unpacked slowly, put the vegetables in the crisper, stacked the soup cans under the counter, wiped down the counter like I always did. I didn't mention it to Sarah. It didn't seem necessary. Later that week, Ellen hosted a small gathering at her house. Her granddaughter had just gotten into college and she was beaming. Everyone brought a dish. I made cornbread and brought a small pot of homemade chili. We ate in the backyard, wrapped in sweaters, telling stories around the fire pit as the sun went down. At one point, Ellen clinked her glass and raised it gently. "To the women who rebuild," she said, "brick by brick." We all smiled. I didn't say much. I just looked out at the trees lining her yard, branches swaying in the light breeze, and let the moment settle. A few months later, I hosted one more dinner. Just Sarah, Ellen, a couple of friends from work, and one neighbor who'd recently moved into the building and brought a chocolate bundt cake still warm from the oven. We gathered around the table, the windows cracked open, to let in the soft air, the kind that carries the smell of distant rain even when the sky is clear. The laughter came easy that night, not the kind that tries to cover silence, but the kind that fills it. At one point, Sarah raised her glass. To Meredith, she said, who built her own life on her own terms. There wasn't a speech or a long pause, just that. Everyone clinked their glasses gently. I didn't say much in return, just smiled, nodded, and let the warmth of it settle. Later, after the dishes were done and everyone had gone, I stepped out onto the balcony. The city was quiet. Streetlights glowed in soft halos along the sidewalk below. I wrapped a sweater around my shoulders and leaned against the railing, looking out at the view I'd come to know by heart. I thought about Nicole and Ryan, where they were now, how things must feel inside that house I no longer visited. I thought about my parents. I hadn't heard from them again, and I didn't expect to. The silence didn't hurt anymore. It just was. I never read Nicole's letter. It stayed where I'd tucked it in the back of the desk drawer under a stack of paperwork I hardly touched. Some stories don't need the last page read to be finished. Sometimes the ending isn't a conversation or an apology. It's a quiet day that passes without pain, a meal shared with people who see you clearly, a deep breath taken without bracing for what comes next. I don't carry anger with me. Not anymore. I carry the lessons, the stillness, the quiet certainty that I survived it all and came through better than I began. I used to think love from others was something to earn, something I had to prove myself worthy of. But it turns out love that's real doesn't need proving. And the kind of peace that lasts doesn't come from anyone else's forgiveness. It comes from choosing yourself, even when no one else will. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. And if my story reminded you of your own, if you've ever had to walk away from someone you once trusted just to find your footing again, feel free to share your story in the comments. I think we all deserve to be seen for who we are, not just who someone else needed us to be.